Hi, folks. Welcome to the next episode of UX Leadership by Design. I'm your host, Mark Baldino. The podcast is and always will be brought to you by Fuzzy Math. At Fuzzy Math, we deliver award-winning digital product design, and we frequently partner with internal design teams of all shapes and sizes to help them augment, to help them grow, and really to help them sort of scale their impact within their organization. And today, I am thrilled to announce we are talking with Maria Giudice, who is an executive leadership coach and the co-author of this book, which is Changemakers, How Leaders Can Design Change in an Insanely Complex World. I read this book about a month ago. I was really fortunate to have a conversation with Maria about the book. And the concept is simple, which is that all leaders can use the design process to implement systemic change, large scale change within their organization. So the book isn't really targeted at design leaders. It's actually targeted at anybody that is a leader or wants to be a leader, and really lays out in a very accessible format what you need to do, the steps you need to take, the people you need to talk, how you can communicate, the process you need to set up. It is a lovely book. This is a lovely conversation with Maria. I'm so appreciative of her for joining us. I think you folks are going to enjoy this conversation, and I would highly encourage you to go out and find the book, grab a copy, and share it with folks in your network. So thanks very much, and let's go. Maria, thanks so much for joining me on the podcast today.
I'm so excited to be here, Mark, and it's a beautiful day right now. So
where are you located?
I'm located in Oakland, California.
Okay, I was going to say I feel like the East Coast and Chicago are mirrored in smoke right now, so I feel like you must be west of all of that.
I am, but we've experienced that too. So where are you from?
I'm in Chicago, based in Chicago. Actually, born and raised in Chicago, and have a design studio here. So, yeah,
love Chicago.
It's a good place as long as you come in the right months, as I like to tell people. As I'm getting a little bit older, I'm getting less patient with the weather, so I'll need to find a warmer location at some point. But I'm not there yet.
Okay. I will hold that space for you today.
Thank you. Well, I really do want to thank you for coming on the podcast. I won't maybe not the first or last time. I'll hold up the book here. You're an executive leadership coach. You're the co-author of Changemakers, which is a new book that came out. I've read it. I've sent it to some of my clients and dog-eared some pages that I thought that they would appreciate. I found the book really invaluable, and so I'm thrilled, frankly, to have you on the podcast. I'd love for you to give the listeners a bit of your background, which just reading your bio is, 3 decades long. It's really, really impressive. But give us, a quick hits. What was what were some sort of bigger points in your journey to get where you are now that would be helpful for the reader, for the listeners to hear?
Okay, well, yeah, I know it's like over 3 decades, which is old and wise.
Yes, nothing more than that.
But I love to talk about sort of these pivot points in your life, because we all have them, and I think they're really important. And because there are these moments in your life where if you catch it, it can put you in a whole nother trajectory. And so I grew up in New York. Even though I live in California, I'm totally still a New Yorker. And, much to my husband's, chagrin, I'm still a New Yorker. And grew up as a painter and an artist. I went to art school. I went to the school called Cooper Union in New York City. And I like to say came in as a painter, came out as a graphic designer. And the reason why I came out as a graphic designer was the first pivot point in my life was when I was in art school. I was really disillusioned about graphic design. I was like, this is like formulaic. You pick some nice fonts, you flush everything left, you give it some white space, you use the golden mean, there was like all of these things that you do in order to get good design. And I was sitting in class, and there was a guest instructor in my class, and his name was Richard Saul Werman. Richard Saul Wurman came into this class full of young designers, and he basically berated us. And he basically said, I always paraphrase, but this is how I remember it: "You are all full of shit." He looked at us all and he's like, design isn't about, decoration or, it's not about the aesthetic. Design is about helping people make sense of the world. And that was that like lightning bolt in the chest moment where I really got it. I really got it that using design to help people make sense of the world. And so this idea of design has been sort of a platform for me my whole life. So I started out as a book designer. So it's not hard for me to make books, by the way. I started out as a book designer. I came out here in the late 80s accidentally to work on redesigning the Yellow Pages. And that's where another pivot point happened, which was this intersection of design and technology and the promise of technology. And so I was in that early pioneering stage where designers were figuring out how to make technology work and how to use it as a new tool. And then I was also an early adopter of designing the internet and the website. My first website was 1993. Like a client of mine said, "Hey, we want to design a website for our, for Peach Pit Press." That was my first website. And I'm like, "Oh, I could do that." I'm like, I don't know what the fuck. I had no idea what a website was. As a matter of fact, I told Nathan Shedroff at the time, "This will never take off." and then I was freelancing at the time. I kept getting busier. I started hiring people to help me with just the workload. The next thing you know, I had a company. I went to art school. I got a degree in art, but I used design as I always say, treat everything in life like a design problem. And if you treat everything in life like a design problem, it creates this framework for you to experiment, understand, make things. So I designed a design company through the lens of being a designer and learned good business practices along the way. And then that eventually led to the acquisition of Hot Studio to Facebook in 2013. And then I had a stint in corporate America for 5 years, to really damage my ego and torture myself.
A little bit of self-check, yeah. Okay.
Yes, but then that was what I learned in corporate America was this idea that it's not just about design process; it's about people processes to help people believe in a mission at scale. And that was really the inspiration behind Changemakers. When I was a VP of design at Autodesk, I felt like I was learning a lot of these skills on the job. And I felt like I was crushing it, but I also made a lot of mistakes. And so the book to me was, wow, I see leaders, creative business leaders, starting with the first book, DEO, in 2011, they're stepping up they're using design qualities to become great leaders. And now we have these creative leaders at the top of organizations, and new skills are needed, and that's the role of the change maker. And so I really believe in this book. And then, of course, I convinced Christopher Ireland to invest a couple of years worth of her time to help me put this book together. And I'm really passionate about it. And I'm so happy it's so well received because I feel like it's the book of the time right now.
Yeah, it's interesting because I know with your previous book, with The Rise of the DEO, like that seemed like a point in time, right? In 2011, 2012 of like, there are these design leaders. And now, I mean, you use the, DEO, you're talking about executives, and now it's Changemakers, which is more accessible in terms of like, who can be change makers and who can be transformational within an organization. But you're nodding your head. So do you agree with that? Is that the shift that's happened over the past, 10,
Yeah,
20 years?
that was exactly it. In 2011, I gave a TED talk about the idea of the DEO, which is a made up term, the design executive officer. And it was the hypothesis that future leaders they're going to be great leaders if they embody qualities of designers. And so that those qualities are change agents, risk takers, using intuition, being a systems thinker, being people centered, and getting shit done. These are all inherent qualities that we as designers already have as part of our training. So if you apply those qualities to business and leadership, this is sort of the new model for leadership. And then if you think of the change maker, it's sort of like taking that change agent quality and going much deeper into it. And I feel like DEO was sort of a provocative idea of the future that came true 10 years later. And now this change maker role is, change makers have been around for, since the beginning of, the dawn of the age, right? But there are definitely this particular point in time, I feel like really requires people who are resilient, adaptable, um, uh, courageous and optimistic to lead change, because our problems have just frankly gotten bigger and more complicated.
Yeah. Do you think that those qualities you just mentioned are need to be inherent in a leader in order to embrace becoming a change maker? I like to say that there's parts of the design process that I do think anyone can learn with certain, capabilities. Let's take the visual arts component out of it, which I think
Yeah.
sometimes is a natural talent, right? And people have
Yeah.
to work at that very, very hard. But there's a lot of the design thinking and problem solving process that I do think is translatable. And so I work with lots of people, different backgrounds that can embrace it. Do you think that's the same with change making, or is it something that's inherent in certain people that as
No.
long as they capitalize on it? Okay, great.
Yeah. This book isn't a book for designers.
That's what,
This
yep.
book, right? This book is about recognizing that we all have creativity in us, right? And a design is more intentional creativity to achieve a goal, right? But if we can unlock the inherent qualities in all of us, and apply that creativity to actually problem solving, anybody can design, right? So yes, there are certain things that, design is a very broad term. Designers are broad, and there's the making part, which requires skill and craft, right? But if you apply design as an overarching strategy, anybody can embrace these ideas. So the invitation is we're opening this notion of being a designer to everybody, and we're identifying tools and skill sets that anybody could employ if they really step into that, those qualities that I said. And when I talk about design as a strategy, I'm talking about, again, being focused on people, um, being experimental, embracing failure as a way of learning. These are just a few things that if people embrace and look at the world differently, they can solve problems from the place of being open-minded and a point in possibility. And when we're open and creative, we have access to more ideas. When we're closed and scared, we then can't see. We have a very narrow lens on solving a problem.
Yeah, right.
Which
It's like like fragility and anti-fragility, right? When you're able
Mhm.
to operate in a world where there is near constant change, if you're able to operate and accept that as this is a given, and you're able to execute within that environment, it's your more effective leader.
Yeah, and it's not linear, right? So it's nonlinear. And that's the other thing about being a change maker is not just trying to go from point A to point B. You are really looking at cause and effect on an entire system and being cognizant that the thing that you're solving is part of the whole system, and that we have a responsibility to make decisions that will have a positive effect on a system. And if we are too narrow in our thinking, we can do a lot of damage.
Yeah. I feel like the qualities that you're describing in order to be a change maker, they don't sound, that to me doesn't sound like revolutionary, but I do feel like people struggle either to recognize it in themselves, embrace it in themselves, capitalize on it. I just feel like the actual implementation, like people put a lot of barriers in front of them to like be a change maker or drive change or be very narrow in their thinking. Like, so I could read the book and then be like, this is, I don't know if I can do this, or this, yeah, this sounds nice. Like, what's your advice to people that are kind of getting in their own way, but maybe are in really, as you say, have a responsibility to drive change that's not at the tactical level, it's at the systemic level? Like, what's your advice to folks who maybe get, I don't know, I'll just use myself, that might get in their own way of being a change maker?
Yeah. And you bring up such a good point. Like, this isn't like this, it isn't rocket science, right? And the concepts in the book are familiar concepts, yet we all tend to fall victim to making the same mistakes over and over again. So even though it's like, yeah, I know we need to be system thinkers and we need to embrace failure as a way of learning, but why do we still fail to like adhere to the very things that we think we know, right? So I often say change starts with you first, and how you show up and the intentions that you set have to be true. Otherwise, otherwise, if you don't show up as a leader, if you don't show up with the right intentions, if you don't show up open-minded and creative, people will then pick up the energy that you bring, and then you're not going to get anything done, right? So change making, really, there's a lot of skills around working with people, and then there's processes. And we tend to like want to focus on the process without really paying attention to the people dynamics that have to happen. And you have to get people to believe in a vision, in a mission. You have to get them feeling like they're seen in the solution. So a lot of the first things is really identifying how you show up. Make sure that you are not showing up in a threatened state, that you're showing up in a state of positivity, possibility, and creativity. And then paying attention to the state that the other people are in. What are they afraid of? What is their shared goals? How do you achieve shared goals? So a lot of the work starts with is working with people and getting a group of people to trust one another so that they can be on this journey together. So that's sort of step one. And the book really goes into understanding people better in order to follow a process that can lead to change.
Yeah. No, I think you lay out in the book, I think the qualities of change makers are, all right, not revolutionary, but I just want to credit you for laying out a process that doesn't feel rigid and straightforward. Actually feels, as you said, iterative, and you're kind of growing, but it does talk about what are the foundational elements, how are we gaining support, what does visioning and communicating vision mean, and I think that you do it in a way that is very, very accessible, and I very much appreciate that. It's not filled with corporate speak. It's also not filled with I don't think I recall you using the term like design thinking. It's not like you're not taking other terms of like, hey, of how people have utilized design thinking in the past. It seems like a very kind of human centered approach to how you would write a book to help people guide themselves on their career. And that's a real credit to you and Christopher.
Well, it's treating everything like a design problem, but you touch on something in that we get so stuck on like processes and terminology. We treat processes like they're religion, right? They're just frameworks. And so our hypothesis, so oftentimes people are like, well, have you looked at Six Sigma or blah, 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 or the latest change management kind of process to apply? And it's like, yeah, we did the research and we looked at all of these things, and some of them, there's bits and pieces of things that work. But we often say, what is the process that your team or company or institution is following, right? And integrate these ideas into that process so that it's not this thing that people have to like adopt or treat as a religion. So, the same is true with terminology. We get so like stuck in like the words, and design in and of itself is, and change is, these are words that are contextual, and everybody's got their own story around design thinking, around agile, around double diamond. Like there's all these stories around these terms, and it's like, sometimes you just have to like wipe the slate clean of the terms. And oftentimes if the word design gets in the way in organizations, I say don't use it. What is the term that is being used that is going to get people to be creative and collaborative and co-creative to work together? And it could be whatever word that makes sense to you.
Yeah.
But don't let the word get in the way of progress.
I think that's insanely helpful advice, I think, to designers and non-designers as well, because we hold our process really tightly, and we'll spend 3 months just describing process and trying to get people to, I'm speaking, as somebody who's done this many times with our clients, and it's like process, words. We're using the wrong words. We're not following the right steps. I think the idea that we need to use an empathetic lens with the people around us, our people in our organization, and kind of understand challenges that they're having and identify what we really want to do is drive change and help people drive change. And in that case, it's finding, as you said, what's the right language or lack of language that's going to attempt to get this implemented or to start to drive change within an organization. But I think you're 100% right. And I'm going to go back to another point you mentioned, which was, I think because it helps us avoid the real people problems and talking to people as kind of humans and really being empathetic, right? If we focus on process, you feel like we're doing our job. And part of leadership, and this is a lesson that it's been painful for me personally to learn, because I am a really process oriented type of person, like that. It's the conversations that I have with people. It's the time I spend listening and understanding, coming with, kind of an open heart to conversations where I probably, if you ask people on my team, when have I led the most? It's those conversations. It's not, here's the plan for fuzzy math. Here's what we're doing over the next 2 years. And I think the same thing can be said for applying the design process, is we focus so much on the process and not on helping people move forward and drive change.
And I often say, as designers, we get in our own way sometimes. We're so religious when it comes to serving people's needs, the end user, the customer, right? And I mean, that's like the customer, everything is about the customer. True. But if we can apply that same fervor and empathy and compassion towards our coworkers, then you're going to get results, because nothing is done in a vacuum anymore. And another thing I like to say, to remind my fellow designers, nobody wants to create a shitty product, right? Like, we can get in our way where we think that we are sort of the last, like, people on the battlefield to make sure that the product's going to be great. We all want to create something good. We all want to do something right by the business. We might have different ways or different points of view to get there. Can we kind of unpack those ideas with remembering that we all want to get to a place where we're creating something we could all be proud of, that's actually going to, improve people's lives. Ultimately, that's why we're in it. Yeah. We're all in it for that. Let's hear the ideas to get there, and let's try to divorce ourselves from our own sort of ethos, our own egos, and get to a place that's shared, and then let's figure out how we can get there together. And you can do it through the design process, but you don't have to like call it out as step one, must listen to users, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. 100%.
Make it accessible to everybody and get them, and make sure that people are seen and heard. It's all about building that trust. And when people trust each other, you can make mistakes openly and you can learn from them. So you have to create that, psychologically safe environment, right? That's a term that's being used, but this is part of the change process.
Yeah. Can we talk about like envisioning, which is kind of a core step here, or vision work? Because that is also one where we could get tripped up on all of the language. And like as change makers, can you talk about the importance of vision? It doesn't have to be quick tips. I mean, you have a whole, I think there's a few chapters just on that, but it always, to me, in reading the book and in thinking about my journey as a leader, change makers I've worked with, that seems like it seems really hard to define, and maybe that's okay. But like, what's your take on it? What do you think is not maybe the most important step, but a really important step?
Well, yeah. I do talk about the importance of a process, right? I also think you don't skip you don't skip the points in the process. You might jump into a process at different points, but we define the process as a loop, right? For a reason, because it's not going from point A to point B. It's like you need to follow all these points in the process. The first is the discovery, right? The input. You need input in order to have an outcome and an output for vision. So you still have to really talk to people. You still have to listen. The first stage is really about getting environmental context and understanding people and trying to understand the problem you're trying to solve, right? So that's first step one. Then it moves into envisioning, which is really synthesizing all of that content and context that you've learned into, and bringing people into that process, making sure that they're part of the journey so that we can get to a sense of shared goals. And so the vision is sort of the why. Why are we doing this, and why should people care about it? Right? Again, I think we focus on what too much, when if you really want people to believe in something, they have to believe in the why. And so how do you get all of so again, these are common tools that designers use of gathering and synthesizing information. But the important thing is it's done not as a design activity. It is done as a team, organizational level activity, so that we can get to the why. And it has to be aspirational, but it has to be realistic, right? So people can believe in it. And then, and it could be a statement, it could be a series of principles, it could be whatever is relevant to what is needed in order to communicate what the why is for the problem you're trying to solve. And then you need to communicate the hell out of it. Another big part that underlies all of this is the importance of really good communication. And people really underplay that, but it's critical to success. So when you're in a point in the process, what is your strategy to communicate where you are in the process and how people can understand it, but also how they can see themselves in it? So it's really getting to shared goals. And the big one is to pay attention to the people you don't agree with the most, right? Because they can be the blockers along the way, and they'll either be vocal or they'll be silent. And so a big part of that discovery phase is speaking and listening to stakeholders that agree with you and don't agree with you, and to try to get to a place to understand where's our commonality so that you can accept where we're at and believe in the piece of the vision that you see yourself in.
Fantastic. I think that those potential roadblocks are we can either put our blinders on, or we have, or we can listen to them and embrace them. And part of that is, as you said, in order to get to the why, it is that listening, that sort of empathetic approach, and then communicating it. So um, I don't want to say you make it sound simple, but you make it you it's understandable as a process. It comes through really, really well in the book, and I know you have your whys, and you're using that wisdom to share with a broader group. I think just a really, like I said, accessible, friendly way to extract the design process and apply it towards like broader change. And I I really just want to applaud the effort and the book. And it's one that I've had for a few weeks now and referenced multiple times. And so I just want to say thank you again for writing the book with Christopher, for coming on the podcast, and sort of sharing a bit of your wisdom with us. And I know the folks in my network and the listeners of the podcast are going to have a tremendous to learn from you and the book. If people do want to find you, where should they find you? And the book, I'm pretty sure, is available anywhere we sell books.
Yeah. I mean, I think the best way to find me these days is on LinkedIn. So, I post a lot of things on LinkedIn. So you can follow me there. You can reach out to me. I also am an executive coach. So some people who are interested in coaching could reach out to me. Just don't send me a solicitation. That's the only bummer about LinkedIn. It's become so popular. But man, oh man, it's like, oh no, please don't sell me another website IT service solution.
Do I want to accept this request or not? Are they going to pitch
Do
me, or
not.
is this
Yeah.
like a solid connection? It is a challenge. It's a great platform, but it is a current challenge in
Yeah.
how people utilize it.
But I'm always responding to people who have questions. I'm very accessible that way.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Thanks for being accessible today. Thank you for writing the book. Really appreciate your time and energy that went into that, and the time and energy you put into the podcast today. So I'm sure people will be reaching out and following you, and just want to say thanks again.
It's such a pleasure to be here, Mark. And again, I'm so happy that this book is well received, because it's really important to be out in the world right now.
You bet. It should be well received. So happy to hear it. All right.
Thanks.
Thanks, Maria. Appreciate it.